Mr. Chair, ladies and gentlemen, if there is a God, I doubt that he is impressed by the excesses and the needless proliferation of rules that make lives worse of churches like Catholicism, of churches like the Anglican Church. I doubt that he is impressed by people that say that you can only worship him in a particular way and that his holy books must be interpreted in a particular fashion. And I doubt that he is impressed by churches that take 10% of the wealth of very poor people and use it to buy some of the world's most important art. And that is why this team is proud to oppose organised religion that has been making lives worse, that has been making nations worse, that has been making wars worse for thousands and thousands of years. Let's be very clear on this. For those of you hoping for an 8-point model, there isn't one. This is not about a policy, it is about a value judgment. So what we will clearly set out is what we oppose and what we support. What do we oppose? We oppose churches, we oppose organisation, we oppose leadership, and we oppose exclusion. So, if for instance people have a particular holy text that they wish to study, we are happy for them to do so. If they wish to come together and study and discuss that holy text in a certain place together or pray together, we are happy for them to do so. We are not happy for one person to be a leader of that group. We are not happy for people to be able to exclude on the basis of particular interpretations of that text. And we are not happy for any form of kind of organisation or structure behind that. We are happy for people to pray to their gods. We are happy for people to determine themselves what the meaning of those holy texts is. And much as I perhaps would like it to be, we don't think this is a debate about the existence or not of God. It assumes that there is some sort of existence of God and that people should be able to determine that themselves. Why do we oppose organised religion? Firstly, we think that presuming the existence of a God, it disrupts that connection with God. Secondly, it foments tension and conflict in the world. And thirdly, it makes the lives of individuals worse. Firstly, it disrupts the connection with God. If religions do reflect the existence of a God, we think that this means that people are less able to personally determine their connection with that God and to personally realise that connection with that God. And we think that religion has to be characterised by spirituality rather than structure, because it is about finding that personal connection with God and finding the ability to connect with him personally. Why do religions stop that? Firstly, because they make decisions that exclude certain interpretations that are just as valid as any other. Like the Conference of Nicaea, which determined that if you wanted to be a Christian, then you had to accept the divinity of Jesus, even though that question is entirely not there in the books of the Bible as they were originally written. Like the biblical apocrypha that were excluded from the Bible, that showed things like Jesus being a troublesome child who used skills like sorcery to kill other people, like the churches that have a particular interest in a type of interpretation of God. Those interpretations of God, A, could be correct. They might be the correct way to worship, and people deserve the ability to know them and understand them and not be excluded from their communities if they disagree with their church. But B, that people ought to be able to find their own way. Done.
Okay, so what you've said is that we need to be able to criticise pre-existing religious modalities of thought. Doesn't our model solve for that with the Protestant Reformation, whereby we criticise pre-existing religions and we often make new ones?
Two reasons why that's not the case, though. Two reasons why that's not the case. One, the Protestant Reformation did nothing about all of the facts of the way that Christianity had been delimited by people before that, except for about 50 years' worth of indulgences being given. Two, all of those Protestant churches have themselves created exactly the kind of power structures, exactly the kind of limiting structures the Catholic Church already had. Second part of this argument. The presence of this authoritarian structure disrupts the moments of personal realisation that we think are at the core of spirituality. So again, we look to institutions like the Catholic Church and say that rather than being able to have a personal connection with God, you need to have your priest as an interlocutor for that connection and depend on that priest there. And that exists for other churches as well, when fundamentally your realisation of religion, your realisation of what it means to you, is disrupted by people who claim the authority to say that that realisation is wrong, that that realisation doesn't reflect reality, even though you personally might believe that you have found your connection with God. But thirdly, we think that there's a proliferation of rules which remove the focus on connection with God from people who want to worship God in a particular way. So the political fight over condoms for Catholics makes every Catholic a warrior in a war over politics that has nothing whatsoever to do with that Catholic's ability to worship God and to enter the kingdom of heaven. They shouldn't be involved in that, and they shouldn't be forced by their priests, as they often are, to be a part of that. And that applies to Presbyterians and things like gambling. It applies to people like members of Ian Paisley's church and their willingness to support horrible, horrible political parties that he was involved in. Secondly, fomenting tension and conflict. It is true that there are wars that haven't been based on religion. It is more true that there are wars that have been based exclusively on the existence of organised religion, that have been whipped up by organised religion, that have been created by organised religion. Like hundreds of years of the murder of Muslims in the Holy Land by Christians, whipped up by the Catholic Church. Like generations of wars in countries like Bosnia. Firstly, religion, and organised religion in particular, is a metric to dehumanise others by their membership of an exclusive community and their non-membership of your exclusive community. Serbs, Croats, Bosniaks, same ethnicity, same language, one difference, religion. And yet when you ask the people that murdered Croats in the Bosnian War why they did it, they would tell you it's because being a member of a particular church makes them less human than others. And when you look, for instance, at the Sudan, the language that is used by those people who are fomenting genocide in black areas of southern Sudan is to call black Africans the Arab word for slaves based on their identification with the religions of Christianity and animism, which they see as superstition. When you look at Chad, you see exactly the same thing applying. You see exactly the same thing applying the other way around to Arab people. Secondly, ideological communities create hard barriers based on people never communicating with one another, despite the fact that they have strong identifications. You look to West Belfast and you look to East Belfast, and you find poor communities that are roughly the same as one another, except for the fact that they go to different churches and they identify with different organised religions. They are very different to the wealthy Protestants of East Belfast, and yet the politics of those incredibly poor people is destroyed by the divisions between them, created by the fact that they never ever come into contact with one another when all of their institutions, when their schools, are defined by their religion. Finally, this makes the lives of individuals worse. It firstly limits freedom and agency, and does so systematically in ways that are misogynist and that stop people from being with the people that they love. Oftentimes, those rules means that people don't get to be with the person they love because of their gender. Oftentimes, you get things like pressure from Hindu and Sikh groups not to marry Muslims, and for families to exclude people from their families because religious leaders from those communities don't want members of those families being there. So they don't create religious communities, they break down pre-existing family communities by excluding people that want to take one simple step outside of the dogma of this religion. Ladies and gentlemen, God can make people's lives better. But interlocutors to God, leaders who determine your relationship with God, and people who are there to tell you every step of the way that your personal beliefs about God can only make your lives and the world a worse place. This important motion must absolutely stand.